If I'd driven up the weekend before, when the leaves were still on the maples, I would have seen the for sale sign before the auction company hammered it into my brother's lawn. Instead, I stood there in my church shoes, holding a casserole dish of condolences and read sold subject to court approval on a laminated placard. Tommy left me his house. I had the original will in my purse. So who filed a codicil I'd never heard of, and why did the signature look so much like his? That was the question that kept me on the sidewalk instead of marching up the porch steps and embarrassing myself in front of half of Mariner's Cove. Thomas J. Bell, the capital T crossed too hard, the B open at the bottom because Tommy always lifted his pen too soon. At first glance, it made my throat close. It looked like my brother had changed his mind and forgotten to tell me, which would have hurt worse than the house. Then I noticed the ink. Tommy had used the same blue-black fountain pen cartridges for 30 years, ordered by the box from a stationer in Portland who closed every August and sent apologetic postcards with little anchors on them. Every birthday letter, every Christmas note, every envelope addressed to Miss Bell's army of third graders came in that blue-black shade that dried almost gray at the edges. The signature on the codicil was navy, bright, clean navy, drugstore navy. I was 67 years old, a retired schoolteacher with bunions, a grief headache, and broccoli casserole cooling in my hands, so I did not leap straight to fraud. Teachers learn early that the child with paste on his shirt may not be the one who ate it. But I did step closer to the porch, squint through the storm door at the copy taped inside, and feel something in me turn from sorrow to attention. The house smelled even from outside like cedar shingles after rain and the pipe tobacco Tommy claimed he only kept for atmosphere. The front windows were bare. Someone had already taken down his curtains. Orange flags marked the septic line. A man in a quilted vest was telling a young couple that the upstairs needed work, but the lot was the real asset. The real asset, that was my brother's porch. The porch where Tommy and I had shelled peas into a metal bowl the summer our mother died because neither of us knew what else to do with our hands. I set the casserole on the porch rail and took the will from my purse. Mr. Haverson, our family attorney, had kept Tommy's original since 2008. Tommy left me the house and everything in it, minus small bequests to the Maritime Museum, the library, and his old fishing club. No wife, no children. He'd made the will on his 65th birthday because Tommy liked tidy circles. If I'm old enough for Medicare, he'd said, I'm old enough to stop pretending I'll live forever. The codicil taped behind the storm door said that same day, Tommy amended the will to leave the house to our distant cousin, Marla Peake. Marla was technically family in the way a fork in a junk drawer is technically silverware. Her grandmother and ours had been sisters. I had seen her maybe 6 times in 40 years, funerals, one reunion, a Thanksgiving where she asked the price of every serving dish as if the mashed potatoes came with appraisals. She sent a sympathy card after Tommy died. It said, thinking of you in this difficult season, and had no handwritten note. I turned to the auction man. Excuse me, I'm Tommy Bell's sister. His smile shifted. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. Why is there a sale pending on my brother's house? He glanced toward the driveway where a silver SUV sat angled by the hydrangeas. The woman leaning against it wore a camel coat, white jeans, and sunglasses that made her look uninterested in weather. Marla lifted one hand, not quite a wave. We were retained by Ms. Peake pending probate approval, the auction man said. Ms. Peake is not the beneficiary under the will. She filed a codicil, ma'am. I have the will. I understand there may be competing documents. Competing documents, as if Tommy had left 2 recipes for pound cake. Marla walked across the damp grass, careful with her boots. Her hair was the color of expensive straw, her face arranged for sympathy. Ruth, she said, I was going to call you. When? Her mouth tightened. This is awkward. That is one word. Maybe we should talk privately. Then take down the sign. I can't, nothing is final. Why list the house before probate is settled? Because carrying costs don't wait for feelings. That sentence did more than the sign. It showed me the person under the sympathy face, and that person had been impatient for some time. Tommy never mentioned changing his will, I said. Maybe he didn't want to upset you. My brother once called me from a dock in a thunderstorm to confess he had eaten my emergency tin of shortbread. He was not secretive by temperament. A little color rose in her neck. People are complicated at the end. He wasn't at the end in 2008. Her eyes flicked to the will in my hand. Quick, but I spent 38 years watching children look at spelling lists hidden in their laps. Guilt has a direction. Marla, I said, why is the codicil dated the same day as the will? He must have reconsidered after meeting with the lawyer. On his birthday. Apparently. Tommy was sailing that day. Now she looked at me directly. You can't possibly remember one day 17 years ago. But I could, not because I have a marvelous memory. I lose glasses on my own head and once put paprika in oatmeal. I remembered because Tommy's birthday was his holy day. Every November 3rd, unless the harbor was iced over or a doctor restrained him, he took the Sea Lily out alone at dawn, sailed past Crow Point, came home frozen and sunburned, and wrote me a letter about the weather. Tommy conducted no business on his birthday. No banks, dentists, court offices, or paperwork. He believed paperwork on a birthday invited more paperwork. I remember enough, I said. Marla leaned closer. Don't embarrass yourself, Ruth. Tommy made promises to more people than you. Then she walked away, and I stood there with my casserole, my original will, and a house full of strangers measuring my brother's life in square footage. My first impulse was to call Mr. Haverson and cry. My second was to go home, change shoes, and find paper. I did both in that order. Mr. Haverson was 84 and semi-retired, which meant he came into the office 3 mornings a week to disagree with his son. He listened without interrupting except once to say, "Do not hand anyone your original." "I taught 4th grade," I said. "I know better than to hand over the master copy." "Good, bring it tomorrow. I'll file an objection and move to halt any transfer until authenticity is determined. But Ruth, a facially valid notarized codicil carries weight. We'll need more than your sense of ink." "It isn't a sense, it's navy." He sighed fondly. "Bring whatever you have." Whatever. I had lived in the back bedroom of my little ranch house, up a pull-down attic ladder that had been threatening my hips since 1999. I put the casserole in my refrigerator because grief does not make broccoli more shelf-stable, changed into jeans, and dragged down 6 plastic tubs labeled in my school handwriting. Tommy letters, mom papers, photos, school keep, taxes old, and Christmas. By 8 o'clock, my kitchen table had disappeared under letters, envelopes, postcards, tied charts, and Tommy's old pocket calendars. I made tea and forgot to drink it. I started with birthdays. November 3, 1998. Took Lily out under a pewter sky. Refused 3 phone calls, 1 from the dentist, 1 from the bank, 1 unknown sinner who should know better than to conduct business on a man's birthday. November 3, 2001. Fog thick enough to spread on toast. No paperwork, no visitors, no neckties. November 3, 2004. You asked if I ever get lonely out there, not on my birthday. On land, people ask for signatures. Again and again, Tommy's birthday ritual appeared in blue-black ink. I laid the letters in order and wrote notes on a yellow legal pad. Year, location, sailing, no business, witnesses, weather. I had made hundreds of reluctant children organize evidence for persuasive essays. Don't tell me recess should be longer, I used to say, prove your case. The year that mattered, 2008, was in a shoebox tied with string. Tommy had written 2 days after his birthday. Ruthie, 65 sounds like a speed limit and I intend to violate it. Took Lily out at 6:10 with coffee in the dented thermos you hate. Walter waved me off with 2 muffins and a warning about ice on the dock. Back at 2:40, fingers wooden, nose running, soul improved. Stopped by Haverson's yesterday to sign the solemn papers you keep nagging me about. Don't look smug. I have left the house to you because you are the only person I trust not to paint the kitchen gray. Key enclosed separately once I find the spare. If you do paint it gray, I will haunt the pantry. I read it twice. Yesterday, the will in my purse was dated November 3. Had Tommy signed on the 2nd? Had he written the letter after midnight? Human documents are messy. That was why forgeries hide among them. Then I found his 2008 pocket calendar. November 2, Haverson 10:30 will Burness notarized, groceries, call Ruth, no, let her gloat later. November 3, 65, Lily out 6:10, Walter muffins, Crow Point, back 2:40, soup, no calls. The codicil claimed to be signed and notarized on November 3 at 4:15 p.m. at Burness Clapp's office. Could Tommy have sailed until 2:40, showered, driven 25 minutes into town, signed away his house and never mentioned it? Possible, plausible, no. But court does not void documents because a sister says her brother hated errands. At 10:30, I found the grocery list. It was tucked in an old church cookbook Tommy had mailed me that November with a note saying, "Page 42 is wrong. Never trust a clam recipe that begins with margarine." The list was dated 11/6/08. Cod, onions, half and half, pipe filters, stamps, lemon, black tea, Benadryl, brass polish. The handwriting was steady, downstrokes strong, loops open, no hesitation. I compared it to the photo I had taken of the codicil through the storm door. At regular size, the signature looked right. Enlarged on my printer, it looked careful, too careful. There were tiny wobbles where Tommy's hand never wobbled in 2008. The forger knew the shape of his name, not the speed of it. I slid the grocery list into a clear sleeve and made myself a rule. Originals in sleeves, copies for handling, notes with dates, no accusations beyond evidence. Anger is hot and sloppy, paper is patient. The next morning, Mr. Haverson peered over his glasses at the spread I brought into his office. His son David stood behind him with the expression of a man who had expected one grieving sister and received the National Archives. I know it looks like a lot, I said. It looks, Mr. Haverson said, touching the calendar page, like you graded essays too long. Is that useful? Extremely. David read the codicil copy. This leaves the real property at 17 Gull Lane to Marla Peak. It's notarized by Bernice Clapp. Bernice notarized the will too, I said. Mr. Haverson frowned. Bernice was meticulous. If this is fraudulent, using her seal was either bold or stupid. Can we see her records? She died in 2016, David said. Her notarial journals should be in county storage. Then we request the November 3 entry, Mr. Haverson said. The filing bought time. By Friday, the probate court ordered no sale, transfer, or removal of property from Tommy's house until the codicil issue was reviewed. The auction company took down the online listing. The sign stayed on the lawn, turned sideways as if embarrassed. Marla called that evening. I let it ring 3 times because I am not as mature as people think. You're making this harder than it has to be, she said. I'm asking the court whether the document is valid. You're accusing me. I haven't used your name except where the codicil uses it first. Tommy wanted me to have that house. Then we'll see proof. You think proof is only paper? No, but paper has the virtue of not changing its story when embarrassed. She gave a humorless laugh. You always did talk like a report card. And you always did talk like you were billing by the injury. It was unkind. I regretted it immediately, not because it was false, but because it gave her something to stand on besides facts. Her voice sharpened. You have no idea what he owed. There it was again, promises owed. What did Tommy owe you? Not me, my father. I stood by the kitchen sink, watching a squirrel dismantle my bird feeder with the focus of a safecracker. Leonard Peak, I said. You remember. I remember he and Tommy ran Bell and Peak Marine Repair for 4 years and then didn't. That's one way to put it. I had been in my 20s then, newly teaching, too busy being underpaid and terrified to follow every adult feud. I knew Tommy started a marine engine repair business with Leonard after the Navy. I knew it ended badly. Our mother said only, never lend tools to a man who inventories your gratitude. Tommy never spoke of Leonard except once, when he found an old shop sign in his shed and said, some partnerships sink at the dock. My father built that business with him, Marla said. Tommy walked away with the accounts, the tools, the goodwill, and left my father with debt. We lost our house. My mother cleaned motel rooms until her knees went. Tommy bought Gull Lane 2 years later. I'm sorry for what happened to your family. That's sweet. But a business dispute from the 70s does not make a forged codicil valid. You don't know it's forged. Then why are you frightened? She hung up. Until that call, I had kept Marla in a simple box labeled Greedy Cousin. It was not flattering, but it was clean. Now there was Leonard and a failed business, and a child who grew up believing Tommy had stolen the life she should have had. It did not excuse anything. Forgery is not restitution, but it made the shape of the thing sadder. It also put a crack in my last uncomplicated picture of my brother. The next week, David and I went to the county administration building to request Bernice Clapp's notary journal. I wore my good Navy cardigan because authority figures respond better when one looks like she owns a working iron. At the records counter, a woman named Elise listened, read our court order, and disappeared. She returned with forms and an apologetic look. Retired journals are off-site, she said. We can retrieve specific entries. Full review requires clerk approval. David slid the order closer. Authenticity of a notarized codicil is at issue. We need the November 3, 2008 entry and surrounding entries to establish continuity. Bernice Clapp, Elise asked, her face softened. My mother used Bernice for everything. Bernice made you wash your hands before signing. That sounds like her, I said. She also took thumbprints, every signer, even when she didn't have to, said signatures could lie but thumbs lacked imagination. The inspection was set for Tuesday. Those days stretched. I visited Tommy's grave, which I had avoided because the fresh dirt made his absence too literal. I brought no flowers. Tommy distrusted cemetery flowers. He said the dead would prefer coffee poured near the roots. I compromised by setting a paper cup beside the stone and feeling foolish. Did you cheat Leonard Peak? I asked the grass. The grass did not defend him. I searched my mother's papers and found one photograph of Tommy and Leonard standing in front of a painted sign. Bell and PAKE Marine Repair, ENGINES, Hull Work, Honest Rates. Tommy had an arm around Leonard's shoulders. Leonard was dark-haired, handsome, smiling with his mouth closed. On the back, my mother had written, "Before the trouble." Before the trouble, she had known more than she told me. On Tuesday, Elise led David and me to a records room with a metal table and a sign that said no pens. Pencils only, I approved. The 2008 journal was thick, corners worn soft. Bernice's handwriting was upright and precise. Each entry had a thumbprint, signer signature, driver's license number, document type, fee, and little check marks in the margin. The pages looked like discipline made visible. November 2, 2008, Thomas J. Bell, last will and testament, Haverson Law Office, ID verified, thumbprint, signature. His thumbprint sat there like a small dark island. His signature was blue, black, and swift. So the will had been notarized November 2 but dated November 3. Mr. Haverson had some explaining to do, sloppy, not criminal, but it irritated me down to my socks. Elise turned the page. November 3 had 6 entries: mortgage release, travel consent, affidavit, power of attorney, jurat. At 4:15 the line read, Thomas J. Bell, codicil to will, ID verified. No thumbprint. No signer's signature. No fee. No check mark. Just those words in slightly darker ink cramped between the 3:05 entry and a 4:45 certified copy for someone named Haskell. Elise stared. That's not right. David leaned forward. What do you mean? She never skipped thumbprints, never. Elise flipped back through pages. And no signature, no fee, this looks inserted. Can we get a certified copy? David asked. Yes, I'll need the clerk. Elise hesitated. There may be more. When Bernice died, her son donated her professional papers, journals, seals, correspondence, some personal notebooks too. She wrote notes about odd appointments, not official entries, reminders. Can we review those? David asked. Not without clerk approval and probably donor permission. Her son is Frank Clapp. He works at Broderick's Hardware. We could subpoena her eventually, David said, but subpoenas take time, and Marla's attorney had already filed a response calling my objections speculative and motivated by disappointment. Disappointment is when the bakery runs out of almond horns. This was theft with stationery. I asked if I could speak to Frank myself. As long as you don't pressure him or misrepresent anything, David said. I spent decades persuading 8-year-olds to stop licking rulers. I can be gentle. Frank Clapp was behind the key-cutting machine at Broderick's Hardware, wearing a green apron and magnifying glasses flipped up on his head. He had Bernice's posture and the wary eyes of a man who knew everyone wanted something from hardware stores and dead mothers. I explained the probate dispute and showed him the certified copy of the journal page. He frowned at the missing thumbprint. Ma wouldn't have done that. That's what Ms. Landry at Records said. She made the minister thumbprint a Christmas pageant permission form once, said God could vouch for his soul but not his signature. I laughed before I could stop myself. It was the first clean laugh I'd had in weeks. There may be notebooks in the donated boxes, I said. The county needs your permission for us to review anything related to her notary work. If you prefer, you could review them yourself. He was quiet. Brass dust lined the edge of the key machine. Finally, he said, my mother believed a notary was a gatekeeper, used that word. If someone used her name to open a gate she had closed, she'd come back and rattle every window in town. He took off the apron. I'll call the clerk. Frank did more than call. He met us at the records room the next morning during his lunch break, carrying 2 sandwiches because he said, Ma would haunt me if I let people work through lunch. The clerk allowed supervised review after Frank signed permission for records related to notarial acts or refusals. David drafted an affidavit confirming Frank had packed and donated the boxes after Bernice's death. The notebooks were small, spiral-bound things labeled by year. Most entries were reassuringly dull. June 12, man angry I would not notarize blank document, told him I do not notarize heir. August 4, woman forgot ID, cried, returned with passport. Sep 19, refused acknowledgement, signer confused, daughter too insistent. Then November 3, 2008. Bernice had written, 4:05 p.m. woman approx. 40 blonde camel coat asked for codicil Ray Bell property. Claimed Thomas Bell in car ill-tired. I requested signer come inside. Man in passenger seat did not respond when I approached vehicle. Hat low, scarf. Woman irritated. Signature already on document. Refused notarization. Told her signer must appear willing, alert, ID verified and sign in my presence. She said it was his birthday and he did not want fuss. I said birthday not exception to law. She left angry. Below that in darker ink. Found attempted entry in journal. Did I begin line before refusal? Must void. Check tomorrow. I read it once, then again. Camel coat, Bell property, birthday. Frank whispered, well, I'll be damned. Each receipt shifted the ground under us. The letters made Tommy's birthday habits believable. The grocery list made the signature tremors suspect. The journal made the notarization defective. Bernice's notebook made the defect human. A woman in a camel coat, a man hidden in a car, a birthday excuse, a gate refused. We still needed to tie Marla to motive and opportunity without turning into amateur detectives peering through hedges. David ordered certified copies from the probate file. Mr. Haverson reviewed his old records and confirmed, while looking miserable, that Tommy's will had been executed November 2, but dated November 3 at Tommy's request because he liked the symbolism. I should have insisted the date reflect the act, he told me. Yes, I said. He flinched. Then I added, but you did not forge a codicil. Help me clean your mess. He nodded. 2 days later, Marla's attorney proposed mediation. His letter said Tommy had promised to make right the harm done to Leonard Peake, and that the house represented partial restitution of assets derived from Leonard Peake's labor and capital. Included was a 1974 partnership dissolution agreement. Bell and Peake Marine Repair ended with Tommy buying out Leonard's share for $3,000 and assuming certain debts Leonard had signed. There was also a handwritten note, apparently from Tommy to Leonard. I know you think I stole the future, I only saved what I could. I stared at that line for a long time. I only saved what I could. That was not innocence. That was a man trying to live with a version of events in which someone else drowned. Mr. Haverson remembered more than he wanted to. Leonard drank, he said finally, not socially, not gently. He missed jobs, sold parts twice, borrowed against receivables. Tommy covered debts until he couldn't. When they dissolved, Leonard believed he'd been cheated because the business survived without him. Maybe Tommy was hard, maybe too hard, but the dissolution was legal. Did Marla know that? She would have known what her father told her. Families make myths out of paperwork and pain. It doesn't make the myth true, but myths can sign documents if you give them a pen. Mediation took place in a conference room smelling of coffee and copier heat. Marla sat beside her attorney, a narrow man with silver hair and a briefcase shinier than his shoes. I sat with David and Mr. Haverson in my navy cardigan, which had become my armor despite a T-spot on one sleeve. Marla did not wear sunglasses, she looked tired. For 1 second I saw the child she had been, listening to a father curse Tommy Bell over a kitchen table. The mediator asked whether there was room for compromise. Marla's attorney offered to let me keep selected sentimental items if I withdrew my objection and allowed the sale with proceeds to Marla. I asked, may I ask Marla one question? David whispered, careful. The mediator allowed it. I looked at her, did Tommy ever tell you he wanted you to have the house? Marla's jaw shifted, it was owed to my family. That isn't my question. Her eyes shone, but she did not cry. He let my father die thinking he was a thief. Was he? You don't get to ask that. You are asking a court to erase my brother's will based on it. She leaned forward, your brother had everything, the business, the house, the town's respect. My father had a rented room and a liver that quit. My mother had bleach burns on her hands. You think paper tells the whole truth because paper was kind to your side. That landed, not because she was right about the codicil, she wasn't, but because I had spent weeks comforting myself with paper while she had spent a lifetime with a story no paper softened. My side, I said quietly, is a dead man whose signature was used. For the first time, Marla looked away. We did not settle. The hearing was the following Thursday. It was not a trial, David explained, but a probate review on whether the codicil should be accepted or voided. The judge could decide or set a full evidentiary trial. The night before, I arranged copies into binders. Original will and execution record, birthday letters, pocket calendar, grocery list and handwriting comparison, certified notary journal page, Bernice's notebook entry, auction listing and catalog showing the attempted sale before probate resolution. At midnight, I found the brass key in my desk drawer. Tommy had mailed it after the will, taped to a note card, for when you need somewhere safe. At the time, I teased him that my own house had locks and a kettle. He wrote back, safety isn't architecture, Ruthie, it's knowing where the spare is. I had never used the key. I had always knocked, then waited while he shouted, if you're selling religion or vinyl siding, I've already been saved. Now the key lay in my palm, heavier than it should have been. The hearing room was smaller than I expected. No jury box, no drama, just wood benches, a clerk, a flag, and a judge with reading glasses on a chain. Frank Clapp sat behind us, which I had not expected. You didn't have to come, I whispered. He shrugged, gatekeeper. The judge began with the sale. David argued the sale should remain halted because title depended on the codicil. Marla's attorney argued my objection was emotional speculation and that any defects in Bernice's journal were clerical. The judge looked over her glasses. Counsel, a missing thumbprint might be clerical. A missing signer's signature, fee, and check mark in a journal where every surrounding entry contains them begins to resemble a parade. I liked her immediately and tried not to show it. David walked through the evidence calmly. He did not say Marla forged anything. He said the codicil's authenticity was unsupported by the notarial record. He showed Tommy's verified November 2 signature, blue, black, and swift, beside the enlarged codicil signature and the grocery list from the same week. He used Tommy's birthday letters and calendar as context, not proof alone. Then came Bernice's notebook. Marla's attorney objected to hearsay, relevance, authentication, privacy, and possibly the weather if he could have found a rule for it. David responded that the note showed Bernice's contemporaneous professional refusal and routine practice, and that Frank had authenticated the source and chain of custody. Frank testified briefly. His voice was rough at first, then steadied. He described packing his mother's notary journals and notebooks after her death, donating them to the county, and granting permission for review. My mother was fussy, he said. The judge asked, in your experience, would she notarize a document already signed by a person waiting in a car? Frank almost smiled. Your Honor, my mother would make the governor come inside. The judge allowed the note. Marla sat very still as David read the entry aloud. Woman approximately 40, blonde, camel coat, codicil regarding Bell property, claimed Thomas Bell in car, birthday, refused. I looked at the table. Part of me did not want to see her face when the story she had built cracked in public. Then she made a sound, not a sob, more like a breath catching on a nail. The judge asked Marla's attorney if his client wished to respond. He whispered to her urgently. Marla shook her head once, then again. Finally she stood. I was there, she said. The room went quiet. The judge's face sharpened. Ms. Peake, you are represented by counsel. You should consult him before making any statement. I know, Marla looked at me. I was there in 2008. I brought the paper. Tommy didn't sign it. Her attorney closed his eyes. My hands went cold. My father had died that spring, Marla said. I found old letters, the dissolution papers. I was angry. I went to Tommy. He wouldn't talk to me. He said Leonard made his choices and he was sorry for the child I'd been, but not for surviving him. That sounded like Tommy, kindness and cruelty braided together. I wrote the codicil from a library form. I copied Tommy's signature from a card he sent my mother years before. I thought if I got it notarized, he'd have to face it. Bernice refused. I left. I didn't file it then. Then when? The judge asked. Marla's attorney whispered again. She ignored him. After Tommy died, I don't know why I kept the paper. I told myself it proved what he should have done. I added the notary certificate from an old copy, filed it with probate, and listed the house. I thought, she stopped. I thought nobody would care enough to look. That hurt most because it was nearly true. If I had been less organized, less stubborn, more eager to avoid embarrassment, the sale might have slid through. A house can disappear into procedure. A dead man's wishes can be smothered under forms. The judge did not shout. Real authority rarely needs theater. She recessed so Marla could consult counsel. When we returned, the order was concise. The codicil was void for fraud and defective notarization. The original will would be admitted to probate. The sale was halted permanently. The auction company was ordered to withdraw all listings. Marla was prohibited from entering or disposing of property at 17 Gull Lane. The matter of criminal referral would be reviewed by the probate clerk and district attorney. No one clapped. Justice in a probate room sounds mostly like paper sliding into a folder. Outside, Marla stood on the courthouse steps, her attorney on the phone nearby. I could have walked past. Part of me wanted to. Instead, I stopped. I won't pretend to understand what your father told you, I said. I won't pretend Tommy was blameless in how he left that partnership. Maybe he owed you an apology he never gave. Her eyes filled. He owed my mother heat in winter. I believe you had winters without enough heat. That's not the same thing. You know? She wiped her face angrily. Are you going to push them to prosecute? I'm going to give the court everything true, I said. After that, I'm going to stop carrying your father for you. She flinched as if I had slapped her. I had not meant it cruelly, though perhaps truth is often cruel when it arrives late. Frank drove me to Tommy's house because David had another hearing and my legs were not entirely reliable. On the way, Frank asked if I was all right. No, I said. He nodded fair. The auction sign was still on the lawn, the placard flapping sideways in the wind. Frank pulled it out of the ground and laid it in his truck. "I'll return it," he said, "with my regards." "You don't have to." "As I know." That was his choice, small but solid. His mother had kept the gate, he would carry away the sign. I stood alone at the front door after he left. The maples had lost most of their leaves. They lay wet along the walk, gold gone brown at the edges. The house needed paint. One gutter sagged. The porch rail still had a faint casserole ring from where I had set down my condolences weeks earlier and forgotten them. I took the brass key from my coat pocket. For a moment I was angry at Tommy, angry that he had left me a house and also a mystery, angry that he had been loved by me and hated by someone else with reasons I could not dismiss, angry that the dead cannot answer cross-examination. We tidy them up because grief is hard enough without footnotes. Then I put the key in the lock. It turned stiffly, but it turned. Inside, the air was cold and close. Furniture sat under sheets. The Maritime Museum boxes were stacked by the dining room. His books remained, though someone had pulled out the valuable-looking ones and left them crooked. In the pantry, 3 tins of soup stood beside stale tea bags. The kitchen was still yellow, thank God, not gray. On the peg by the back door hung Tommy's sailing cap. I had won the house. That sentence should have felt larger. Instead, it felt like standing in a room after the music stops, hearing only the refrigerator hum and your own breath. I had protected Tommy's wishes, but I had lost the simple brother I carried in memory. He was still my Tommy, the man who mailed bad puns and worried about my furnace. He was also the man in Marla's story, survivor of a partnership that left wreckage. Maybe he had done right, maybe he had done only what he could. Maybe those are sometimes the same and sometimes not. On the kitchen table, under a plastic sheet, I found one pipe filter missed by whoever inventoried the contents. I picked it up and laughed softly. "Still lying about not smoking," I said to the empty room. The house answered with its old creaks. I closed the door against the wind. The brass key was warm from my hand now. In the end, the ink had only been the first thread. Pulling it unraveled more than a forged codicil. It unraveled my certainty that paper preserves the whole truth, or that love means knowing every room in a person's life. But paper had done what memory could not. It stood where Tommy could not stand. His letters, his grocery list, Bernice's thumbprints, Frank's choice to open his mother's boxes, all of it made a path through grief that did not require shouting or vengeance or pretending pain excuses harm. I unlocked the front door with the brass key my brother mailed me years ago, the one that came with a note saying, "For when you need somewhere safe," and for one impossible second before the cold air moved through, I smelled his pipe tobacco still in the hall.